hand over to Prashant now. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi all. So my topic. All right. So really, talking about youth, I'm 32 years old, so I don't really see myself as youth anymore, but I've been through that phase in Australia, so I'm happy to share a light, and I've obviously gone through the Girmit heritage and can provide a little bit about my own journey. But it's really about how the Girmit legacy can empower youth today to persuade them to address the social issues in our community. And for me, the starting point there really is something that echoes to mind, that is, if you start with nothing, you have nothing to lose and you have everything to gain. So if you look at our heritage, it's pretty simplistic. We came from an environment where, you know, arguably there was you know, some slavery, there was some very minimalistic desires. You know, people just wanted to take a risk, start a new life, go where the water flowed and go from there. And we had nothing but to learn to survive. And survival instinct is something that I'll keep coming back to as to something that I've certainly gone back to when I've had struggles in my life and learnt to persist and get through, you know, the toughest day. Something that echoes through my mind every time that I go through a difficult scenario, something that my mother told me, and it's perhaps represented in different ways in other words or the other. It's that, you know, time and hour runs through the toughest day. So as Fijian Indians coming from, you know, a struggle point, our most core requirement was to survive, to get through the tough times, to pass the hour with the hope that there would be a better day. And that's where some of our greatest strength lies. So if we can, you know, persevere and get through the struggle, that we would see that better day. Someday we will be able to see the fruits on the farm, be able to own our own homes, to be able to venture out beyond Fiji and to other places in the world. Now that's our heritage. That's what I use to understand a little bit about who I am. You know, I don't think I completely know everything about who we are, because I think part of that is really understanding who we want to be. And then for me, as someone, you know, that has always tried to reconcile, you know, am I more Fijian, am I more Indian, am I more Australian? I've had to sort of understand a little bit about my own limitations and, you know, the blinkers that I have put on myself coming from, you know, our background. And I'm going to share a story that's not original, but it certainly was extremely relevant to me when someone told this story to me. And this man presented at one of the conferences that I ran for the CPA. And his background is Zimbabwean, of African descent, and he told me a story about how back where he grew up, it was normal for him to become a farmer. That was what he was going to do. That was what was defined for him. He was never going to be any more than a farmer. If he had a very good day, he might have become, you know, a tractor driver, because then you used, you know, the machinery to help you do the hard labour. And if you had a really, really good day and were really liked the settlement, then you would go on and become a cook. Because in Africa, if you could become a cook, then you would take care of your family and you would stay inside, indoors, away from the heat, and then your family would have a good life. So that was all he was ever going to become, you know, a farmer, a tractor driver or a cook. One day he had an Australian couple, man and wife, visit Zimbabwe. They were there for a couple of years, and one day one of the women in the village were passing the house of this Australian family, and they saw the Australian lady, she was obviously white, there outside washing dishes, and it was unbelievable. She just had this absolute struck of an image that, you know, just what is going on. She got all the women of the village together and she said, we need to talk about this because I've just seen something that I can't believe. And all the women had a bit of a discussion, and the next day, they had organised a roster where one of the women from the village would be there at the house of this, couple to do the dishes for them, because it was not acceptable that they would watch, an Australian lady wash the dishes when that was their job. That was where they were meant to be, and it was the wrong thing to see. Now, what I'm trying to say here is that everyone has some of these blinkers and they have these limitations, and you set where you define those boundaries to be. Now, if those women had always thought in that way and had restricted them, to that boundary and where they wanted to become and where their life story was going to go, then they would have never made any progress. And this individual who was presenting at this conference was now, fairly senior head of finance at a multinational ASX-listed business, and he had to break that barrier, that mindset, that set of blinkers. And I think the struggle that I feel that the youth of today will have in many ways, one is the identity aspect, but the second part is really to break beyond where we're meant to be, and that's it's an open field. There's no limitations. It's where you want to take it. And it goes back to my first comment that when you have nothing to lose, so you've got everything to gain. And what you want to gain is really first understand who you are a little bit better, and then take that forward. Become the best version of yourself that you can become. And that's really what the challenge has been personally. And every time I get a small win, it's just that reassurance. Now I've got a little bit of gold, in a pot or a bucket or wherever, and I can store that away, use that for a better day, and then you keep moving forward. So, in a simple way, without sort of emphasising too much, really it's about thinking forward. Yes, we've got a legacy, and yes, there's some scars there, and we've gone through a lot of pain, and so have our ancestors, but that pain translated in an emotional sense, in a psychological sense, is actually gold, because you need that sort of a boundary, that robustness to actually get through some of the challenging times that we've got today. We've got this concept of, mixed marriages, a lot more globalisation. People have to be open. Like we heard, 60,000 people migrated from India now. Some Fijian Indians are lucky enough to find other Fijian Indians, and you carry on that legacy. Some will go towards India, some will go towards Sri Lanka, some will have to mix. Maybe we're a representation of where the next 50 to 100 years will become, where the world will become a lot more globalised, there'll be a lot more interaction, and you're going to have to be open-minded about who you mix with, how you interact, and cultures and all of that. And I think we're at the forefront of that, so there's a lot of strength there. So, have the benefit of that strength, what that comes with. Yes, there's a history, recognise that, appreciate that, but that doesn't have to be the blinkers that limit us forever. So, without having to say too much more, I'll just leave it there. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Prashant. I'd like to now call upon our next speaker. He's Deepak Chand. Deepak is an engineer by profession, and he is involved in a lot of volunteer charity work supporting the homeless group from the Hunter Valley region. So without much ado, Deepak.
Thank you, Pushpaji. Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. I'm not a very good speaker, but I will try my best because my trade is totally different from everybody else here. First of all, I would like to acknowledge and respect the traditional land of the Aboriginal people here, and respect the elders past and present, including our Girmitias. And my name is Deepak Chand. I'm the fourth descendant of Fiji Girmitia from Watia Point, Tabua. And my uncle is sitting here. He knows me very well, Mr. G. Ratanji. And today I would like to speak very few things about Girmit legacy. I have seen there is a lot of events are going in Australia, New Zealand, Fiji, and so I will mention about the Girmit legacy people are moving forward. First of all, there has been a lot of events organized by Girmit Diaspora Council in Melbourne, in Melbourne, and here in Sydney by Dr. Satish Rai. And also in 2013, Girmit Divas was hosted in Melbourne by Vimlesh Sharma. Also in 2003, Girmit Divas was held in New Zealand, and Dr. Satish also organized a biggest Girmit event in Semeni Latoga in Fiji. To move forward into 2016, Girmit Abolition Divas was also held in Uttar Pradesh. I think it was held in 2 cities. And in 2018, Girmit Abolition Divas was observed in Fiji, Melbourne, Queensland, and parts of the world, including here in Sydney, and in Sydney to pay respect the Girmitiers and hard work during Girmit days to give us a better education and life. I hope these events and associated publicity and promotional events will place a Girmit history, struggle and legacies on the global map and generate much interest and create work after the event to pursue and Girmit history and legacies for future generations. Tuesday, May 14th, 2018 will be the very significant day, and it will be 139th anniversary of the arrival of Girmitiers in Fiji. The arrival of Girmitiers in Fiji is commemorated by the descendants of all Girmitiers, and descendants of Girmitiers are urged to recognize the day in their homes and with their families, paying homage to the pioneer generations for the sacrifice they made, which enable us to build our lives, emblazing our values and they have left behind. The depth of gratitude to the pioneers, to the pioneer generations is irremediable, and nothing is more fitting than to honor and remember them on the day of first ship Leonidas arrived in Fiji with 463 passengers on 14th May 1879. So the centennial commemoration of Indian indenture system, Girmit, was the starting point of highlight, educate and start the process of address and issues playing in the Indo-Fijian communities in Australia and beyond. We recognize the Fiji has not taught in the schools to promote the Fiji Girmit history for the last 100 years. One significant consequence of the deliberate or otherwise neglect is the descendants of the Fiji Girmitiers have little knowledge of Girmit and the legacies of the Girmitiers. This has impacted on the descendants of the Girmitiers in the negative ways, especially since their flight has fragmented post 1987 and 2000 racial coups. The first significant impact was loss of their Girmit legacy and identity. Until 1987, they believed the Fijian has regarded Fiji as their home and had Fijian identity. But the coup shattered their identity to their core, and many of them now lamenting and questioning their Fijian identity while trying to rediscover their identities in Australia or even in India, the homeland of their ancestors. Almost 14 decades ago, the first Indians from mostly northern India were shipped to Fiji as indentured laborers. Between the next 37 years, from 1879 to 1916, some of 60,500 Girmitians or indentured laborers were brought to Fiji by 87 ships voyages. Or these some 25,000 were succeeded to move back to India, after indenture, while the remainder stayed back. Leonidas was the first ship to hit Fiji and indentured laborers with indentured laborers. As India was the British colony, the time, and the British Australian found India a fertile ground for cheap labor for cane plantations in Fiji. India washed its hands on the sufferings of plight of people in Fiji and paid only token attention of cries from Fiji. Even when Indian Prime Minister Indira Gandhi visited in Fiji in 1987, she reminded Fiji Indians that they were no longer Indians but belongs to Fiji, but we never seemed to belong anywhere. Men and women worked long hours in sun and rain, laying a foundation of strong community. We are better because we inherited their constitution and will strive and achieve, lending the same legacy to successive generations. I hope the younger generation will take some good out of this conference and carry the Girmitius legacy move forward. अंत में मैं यही कहना चाहूँगा कि आज हम हैं हमारी यादें होंगी, आज हम हैं हमारी यादें होंगी, जब हम ना होंगे तब हमारी बातें होंगी। कभी पलटोगे ज़िंदगी के ये पन्ने, तब शायद आपकी आंखों से भी बरसात होगी। थैंक यू वेरी मच। धन्यवाद। बिना कवकलेबू।
We are going to complete this session at about 7 o'clock because we've got to prepare for the cultural program that's going to start at 7:30. Unfortunately, we will not have time for any questions and answers. But what I can suggest to you is, if you have got some questions, if you could write it on a piece of paper and pass it on to the organizers, then I'm sure they'd be able to find a forum where they can address them. So with these few words, I would like to now invite Rahul Krishna Raju. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to acknowledge the Aboriginal ancestors of this land, together with our ancestors, the Girmitians, and our forefathers that came all the way, crossing the 7 seas, as they would say in those days, to the Isles of Fiji, and made Fiji what is today, the beautiful paradise. Ladies and gentlemen, I will not be talking much about the actual happenings or the events surrounding the period of the Girmit, which is from 1876 or 1879 all the way to 1916, to the abolishment of the Girmit era in Fiji. I have basically done a incomplete research which still is subject to scrutiny, and I believe it is the right forum that I should bring it out. And the research is divided into two portions. The first, I will read some historical information, and the second portion is the situation that is affecting our Fiji Girmitiers, or the descendants of the Girmitiers here in Sydney and in New South Wales in particular, and also around the globe, and which is the issue of suicide in our community. And we are known as the population in New South Wales that is leading the data for suicide for the last 22 years. So I'll be talking on that subject in a moment's time. Ladies and gentlemen, the Fiji indentured system, also known as the coolie system, was introduced as another form of slavery in the late 1860s. According to the Anti-Slavery International, the organization, or the international non-governmental organization, and registered as a charity and a lobby group based in the United Kingdom, which is also one of the world's oldest international human rights organization, bases its work on the United Nations treaties against slavery. And one of the famous quotes I would quote: human trafficking is the illegal transportation of kidnapped women, children, and men across international borders in order to put them into slavery at a distinct destination. This form of slavery still is commonly found in most of the third world countries, developing countries, and in developed nations such as ours here in Australia. We may have, by act of law, we may have gotten rid of the slavery, but the elements of slavery remains in our society. And I will elaborate that as well in this presentation. It is estimated that between 500,000 to 800,000 victims of slavery enter the trade each year. And New South Wales is one of that nation, or that state in Australia as well. The first anti-slavery was founded, or the society was founded in 1823, and was committed to the abolishment of slavery in the British Empire, which achieved its objectives in 1838 under the terms of the Slavery Abolishment Act of 1833. The first World Anti-Slavery Convention was organized on the 12th of June in 1840 in London, that attracted delegates from all around the world, including the then United States of America, which was also famously known for the blackbedding many Africans in the slavery system of that time. This year marks the 185 years of coming off the Act of Parliament, thus ending all forms of slavery in the British Empire. On one hand, the British Parliament made the Act of Parliament in 1833. On the other hand, they started the Indian indentured system, which was another form of slavery. A system introduced as slavery, a system based on a form of debt bondage by which 3.5 million Indians were transported to various colonies of the empire to provide labor for the mainly sugar plantation producing nations. The Indian indentured system, and today most commonly referred as the Girmit system, of which we all, Fiji people, we all are related to this system. And deriving its inheritance from the word agreement, which my panelist colleague has earlier mentioned, and I would not elaborate further on that. The British wanted Indians to work in the colonies as workers and devised a system of indenture, which was another form of slavery. From 18 January 1826, when the government of the French Indian Ocean of Reunion laid down the terms of the agreement, which became the 5-year indentured period. From then, the empire adopted the same principles. And that principle became the indentured principle of 5 years, and which continued in Fiji. Ladies and gentlemen, that is a brief history about Fiji, the Girmit, and I'm sure that all of you would know that Leonidas came, and then there were many incidences, many things happened. Dr. Manilal came, the barrister that fought for the Indian population in Fiji, Totaram Sendhai, who is recognized all around the world, who started actually the Satgraha, which became the Gandhi movement. And Totaram Sindhe was in Fiji for 21 years, and he wrote a book, My 21 Years in Fiji Islands. And this inspired Mahatma Gandhi to basically start the movement, in which basically liberated India from the British Empire and became an independent nation in 1945. Ladies and gentlemen, the core that I would like to tell you is that it all started in Fiji, but it ended somewhere in India, and the independence was granted. So our linkage is not only with Fiji, but our linkage is also with India. And we must acknowledge that, and we must adopt some of those principles that our forefathers fought in those days. Ladies and gentlemen, let me continue with the second part, and which is the most interesting part of the research that I am currently doing. And I thank the New South Wales Department of Health, the Liverpool Hospital, Blacktown Hospital, both respective councils, Blacktown City Council and Liverpool City Council, my colleagues, friends in the community, and also the Brahman Purohit Sabha and the Sri Sanatan Dharam Pratinidhi Sabha, the New South Wales Fiji Christian Churches Association, and also the Islamic Council of Australia for their support in giving some vital information. Ladies and gentlemen, we all know that there was an issue with wage. 8 rupees a month, which is about 12 cents US. That was what was paid to our ancestors a month. Survival is not the issue. The issue is they were provided with a 7-day portion of ration to eat. And in Totaram Sindhe's book, there are many incidences recorded of Kunti and others that they had to starve for 4 or 5 nights before the next ration was issued again. So this is very interesting. And coming back to the New South Wales history, that our government, our people of New South Wales is directly linked to our Girmit heritage in Fiji with the CSR, introduction of CSR, the New South Wales Audiences Act, and the parliamentary acts that were made at that time for the benefit of Fiji. Ladies and gentlemen, during that period of 1879 and 1916, 330 cases of suicide was reported in Fiji. And there were various reasons. In those days, the causes of suicide was lack of financial support. Number one, as Dr. Satish Rai has pointed to me out a couple of weeks ago, was jealousy. Because the British system was divide and rule, and one of the programs they had brought to Fiji was, for every 100 men, there were only 33 women available. So, which basically meant that there was jealousy in the system, in the plantations, and there was marriages, there was divorces, but they were not recorded. So these were some of the reasons that led to suicide in that era. In New South Wales, the 3rd highest cause of death after road fatalities and cancer is suicide. In Sydney alone, in 2018, of our Fiji Indian population, and minusing the population that have already taken Australian citizenship, they are no more counted or recognized as a Fiji national. They are counted as an Australian citizen. So those data cannot be verified. But the data that is available within New South Wales Health for nationals born in Fiji, but they are residing in New South Wales, 19 deaths of suicide in 2018 alone. 27 in year 2017, 37 deaths, of which we had children, adults, young, old, women, men. Even a Pandit committed suicide. What do we question? Or who do we question? Or what do we question? These are some of the questions that we need to ask ourselves. What is this population going through? Our ancestors committed suicide for a reason. There were situations that came in their life. But what are the situations that is facing our community here? Ladies and gentlemen, this is a topic that it is very difficult to talk about, but it is an important issue that we must address at a forum of this nature so that many questions could be answered. Is it impulsive buying? Is it we buying wealth for our future? Is it we're creating wealth and we're getting in more bondage of debt? Or is it we are not understanding what we are doing here in this country or in this society, and we cannot assimilate in this society. Ladies and gentlemen, the total figures that were released by New South Wales Health last year was 11,606 deaths recorded for the period from 2010 to 2018 in the state of New South Wales, and of that, 972 deaths of Fiji nationals, leaving alone if there was any recorded information of an Australian citizen who was of a Fiji background. So that information is not available. Ladies and gentlemen, we are running away, or probably running out of time, and my moderator is giving me a time as well. So I've got some questions that needs to be answered, and I will leave you all to ask those questions. Number one is the family linkage of the Girmit suicide. We need to do research on this, and I believe strongly that there is a hereditary linkage between some of the suicide that were committed in between the period of 1879 and 1916, and that being committed of our people in New South Wales. And I'm sure similar statistics will be also found in New Zealand, in America, in Canada, and also in the UK, where our population are residing. And this is some of the questions we need to ask. Is there a linkage? Is this the way of thinking of our people? That whenever we have a situation, whenever we have a problem or issue, suicide is the resolution to the problem. We need to ask ourselves, and we need to address this now, and do not lead this to the next generation. We need to answer this. And the other question is there suicide of Fiji Girmit descendants? And one of the reasons would be marriage failures, breakdowns, divorce, separation, child custody, finances, loss of property. Could this be a reason for commitment of the suicide? And finally, we all need to be aware that the government of the day in Australia is providing support, and there is counseling services available. There is also face-to-face counseling services available, as well as many forms of grants available. But the question arises now is, are we able to access these grants? And I'm sure my dear colleague, Ms. Ramzan is a fighter in this area, and she will definitely help the community at large. And Dr. Satish and the team for organizing such event of this magnitude. But before I go, ladies and gentlemen, we must ask ourselves, are we the next victim of suicide? We must ask ourselves, are we the next victim of suicide? Are we the next in the statistical list? We need to answer this question, and we need to educate our children. And before we depart from this venue here this evening, we must all agree that we need a community initiative to have a 24-hour hotline, a face-to-face counseling session with people in need of who in the community who are in the process of thinking, or probably in the process of the act of suicide. Ladies and gentlemen, we all must act together. We must stop this, the devil that is killing our population. Thank you very much.